Heyo, what is up? This is Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak, bringing back Deven Johnson to the CarCast. That's what we're going to call it. The Derek Carr cast. That's all we talk about these days is Derek Carr. But we're gonna get into a lot today. We're gonna get into the Derek Carr of it all. We're gonna hear from Scott Shanle, who was on Sports Talk this week. He had some hot takes, which, I wouldn't say Scott is the hottest of taker, but he had some hot takes as it related to Derek Carr. So we're gonna hear from that. And then we're gonna get into needs. We're gonna get into positional needs. We're gonna take the second segment and break down, okay, what are the positions the Saints don't need to address, or at least of lesser need? There's pretty much every position they probably could address. And then the final segment, we're going to rank the top positions of need. That's what the podcast is that you're going to be getting into. But Deven, welcome back. You look a lot clearer. We got you set up with a microphone, a camera. We're doing this like professionals now. How you feeling, man? How you doing?
I'm feeling good. It always feels good to look good, sound good in this instance and play good. So, big shout out to you, Jeff, for getting me right. I'm happy to be back. And the anticipation is definitely mounting. We're only a week away from the draft. So I'm excited.
Well, some of us seem a little more invested in looking good and playing good than others, because if you've been following along, a majority of the Saints players are in New Orleans this week at the team's optional offseason workouts. One is who's confirmed is Derek Carr. We spent so much of last episode talking about Derek Carr that I don't think people need to hear more from me about it. Nothing has really changed, but we haven't heard from you yet. So I guess, why don't you lay on me where you're at, right? Like, from a fan's perspective first, when the news came out that he's dealing with a shoulder injury, blah, 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 he has not been present. We have not heard from him. He was not here for the Super Bowl. He hasn't been active anywhere to make it clear, like, I'm the Saints quarterback and I want to be here. Where have you landed on this throughout this whole process? Because I think there's a lot of noise. And to this point, there's been nothing out there to say none of this, like any of this noise is not actually there. It's just being allowed to sit there and people are to react to it.
Yeah, no, definitely. This is funny. It's giving me two different feelings. I don't know if you or anyone out there is a big WWE fan, but this kind of feels like Derek Carr came in as the hero or whatever, and then he comes out and he turns. They have a guy named Daniel Bryan. He used to come out and everyone would say, yes, yes, yes. And then, when he turned heel or when he turned bad, his whole thing was no. And I feel like that's Derek Carr right now. Derek Carr is getting his get back on fans and the organization. We've shown him nothing but hate. We've shown him nothing but angst. And I feel as though, that's gotten to Derek Carr a little bit. So he's turning it back on us. So, okay, you guys want to talk about me? Well, now I'm going to play hurt. And I actually am hurt. But you guys don't know the extent of it. And, we still have financial obligations to him. So I feel like Derek Carr is trying to have some autonomy in the situation. And it is putting us in a pretty precarious position.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it in the sense that this very much feels like a heel turn for Derek. And, I think of The Rock when I think of like the ultimate heel when he was I feel like he really kind of became that of like, oh, I like this guy. And I'm like, wow, he has the ability to really make me hate him, know? And Derek hasn't said anything. We haven't seen the mic skills for Derek. Derek's doing it all with passive aggression, it seems like, and it's working. It's working. But I do think you got to a good point there in that, like, I do get a kick out of folks going out there and being like, I can't believe he's doing this. Like, why? You've spent the last 2 years doing nothing but trying to bully the guy and then not wanting to be here. I'm surprised more people aren't doing victory laps saying, like, we did it. We have made the guy hate this place so much that he won't even show up.
But see, and that's kind of the thing. I mean, I hate to call the Saints fans bullies, but it gets to a point that when you bully a guy for so long, you start to feel a little bad. Like, you just can't, you can't just beat him up and take his lunch every single day and just have no remorse. So now, this is the time where fans are maybe having a little bit of reflection, like, oh wait, maybe we've overdone it. But hey, you make your bed, you got to lay in it.
You can do that. but it kind of makes you the bad guy in that scenario. Right?
Exactly. Derek Carr is no longer the villain.
But no, I mean, no, Derek is very much, Derek is the villain. There's no getting around it that Derek is the villain in this scenario. And it kind of feels like he's embraced it, and that's a topic that Scott Shanle, not so much the villain part of it, that Scott Shanle got into on Sports Talk this week. He he chatted with Steve Geller and Charlie Long. We have a cut of that here. So let's go ahead and listen to that, and we can share our thoughts.
The team's reporting for workouts. Meanwhile, he's posting YouTube videos reviewing high-end vehicles. And it just seems like, I don't know, the guy way out of touch with this team, with the fan base. It just doesn't seem to be on the right track.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that was part of my frustration is whether or not maybe he has a hurt shoulder. I don't know. I mean, it'd be nice for his side or the organization to even come out and clear some things up, and so just let things go and let things kind of swirl out there, because until you debunk it, every story is true. But I agree with you. I think it's just it's bad taste. I don't really think it's coincidence that you choose that day to release your new YouTube review special while your teammates are reporting, and it's passive aggressive type stuff. And you're already kind of not in the best light with the fan base. It's probably not the best thing to do. In this business about winning games, that's how you get in good graces with fan bases, and that just hasn't happened enough the last couple of years.
Scott, I saw your tweet about it. I agree 1,000%. It comes off as petty and petulant. And I mean, when you kind of take a look at what the Saints have been posting with their players at these OTAs, like their workouts and their lifting weights and, the building camaraderie with the team, and then you see him, Derek Carr, who probably hasn't been in New Orleans for the past 3 months at this rate, posting a car review with his brother, and he's talking about, a former 49er and a former Raider. This is the only time we get together. It's just, it comes off terrible on Derek Carr. It's a poor reflection on him.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. I think that's what kind of made my blood boil a little bit. I probably don't send out that tweet if I don't see the YouTube video of the car review thing pop up. And you live long enough and you just don't think things are coincidental. You just, you release car reviews and it probably wouldn't have been a big deal. But when you do it, when your teammates are showing up, getting ready to grind. And I think the other frustration for me is, been a rough couple of years. You fire Dennis Allen, you bring in a new head coach. There's new life, there's new energy in the fan base, and then this is dumped on everybody. And I think it's just a reminder of kind of all the BS the last couple of years. And I think it's just frustrating.
But yeah, and so we have, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see Scott Shanley's tweet, which is kind of what they were referring to, and I'll read it. He says, "My 2 cents about Derek Carr's shoulder injury news: if he's pouting because the Saints are going to look for a young QB in the draft, and he is too thin-skinned to be your quarterback. And the guys in that locker room deserve better. A competitive person would say it's time to play so well that the young guy won't touch the field. Anyways, nothing is promised to anyone in the NFL. Everyone's time comes to an end. Nobody's owed anything. If really injured, should be at the facility and surrounded by surgery specialists today. Miss Benson didn't pay you $40 million a year to do car reviews on YouTube. Tough times will always reveal a man's character." And again, that's Scott Shanle, who, former Saints linebacker, now does the pre and post game for the Saints on their broadcast, on their local broadcast. And yeah, I mean, I think he's spot on with a lot of that. I am curious, in terms of how much control he has over that video. What I will say is he clearly made no effort to stop it in terms of not posting. Like if I'm Derek and I'm trying to not come off as passive aggressive and petty, as Charlie put it, I'm not posting. I'm making sure that type of thing isn't happening, whether it was intentional or not. Not making sure it's not perceived that way is kind of an admission in itself.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I just feel like the word petty was perfect. Given the climate of everything that's going on, Derek Carr is very much so aware of the criticism that he receives. He knows, he might not be responding to people individually on Twitter like Kevin Durant, but he is very cognizant of the fact that people go to sleep wishing that he was not our quarterback. So I just think the timing of this, the fact that he allowed it to happen, it definitely did indicate potentially, some feelings on his side, but also just a lack of care. And I think, going forward, it could play a big factor on what we do, and how we look at him. And yeah, it's just not a good look overall. It's no other way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing Scott said there toward the end is it kind of hits on what annoys me the most about it, is that the last 2 years have been not fun, right? They have been negative. Every time something good seems to be happening, something bad shows up to cut it off, right? You start 2-0 in 2023, right? It's easy to forget. Like the Saints started 2-0 each of the last 2 years. Why is this so terrible? Well, every time you get to that point, something seems to go wrong, right? You're 2-0 in 2023. You have the shoulder injury in Green Bay. You blow a 17-0 lead, and this 3-0 start where you're kind of on top of the world dwindles into, and then it turns into fights with Mike Thomas and that whole scenario in the locker room is kind of fracturing, and suddenly you're just like, we're here again. Yeah. Fast forward to 2024. You start 2-0. Everything seems perfect. Then Eric McCoy gets hurt. Things go off the rails. You lose 7 straight games. It's all ugly. You fire the coach. It seems like things are getting back. Okay. And then, okay, we're here again, right? It's every time you're, as a Saints fan, you're sitting there like, wow, it's finally starting to turn our way. The winds seem to have shifted. Nope. Something arrives to make you miserable again. And I don't think Derek Carr was gonna be what made Saints fans happy in terms of, we're where we need to be. But you hire Kellen Moore, you're in a new head coaching area. The vibes are supposed to be good. The vibes should be positive. Everyone should be showing up excited for what this new era could look like. And instead, this is where we are, talking about a quarterback that no one really likes. But I think a decent number of us could begrudgingly admit that he hasn't been terrible, right? And instead of having that conversation of, okay, what should we expect from the Saints this year? What is their realistic ceiling? We're having conversations about like, well, I guess they should draft a quarterback now. And do we start that guy? Do you start Spencer Rattler? Like before the season has even started, in that time of year that there should be nothing but optimism, it's been turned on its head. And all we have is negativity, and that drives me nuts. It drives me insane because I've had enough of that. We have the season to be miserable. This is not supposed to be the time for misery, but here we are.
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, Jeff, you talked about a new era. First of all, in order for something, I'm not going to say in order for something to be new, but in our case, in order for the Saints to experience some kind of newness, there has to be change. Derek Carr inevitably will be a part of this change. Kellen Moore was step 1. Our quarterback will be step 2. Now, I will say that going into this season, there's an innumerable amount of questions. What are we going to do with quarterback? What are we going to do here, there? But ultimately, the Derek Carr situation, as of right now, I would say, it puts it to where Spencer Rattler right now is our guy. We can say that, Spencer Rattler right now is the only guy that we have, the only guy that we've seen something from. And that's not comfortable. So I understand, your frustrations. I understand that it's like we just can't escape this circus, but we have to have some patience. At least we don't have Dennis Allen anymore. At least we have 2 guys, as in Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley, who have won something. So let's trust that, let's trust them coming from a winning culture. Let's trust this change. Let's trust the youth that they have, the innovation that they have. And let's just take it slow. But I do think that, as of right now, this is the ultimate monkey wrench in the circus. No one wants to see their $40 million quarterback with a bum shoulder who's 35 years old reviewing a Rolls Royce like it's MTV Cribs. You don't want to see it. I get it. But I think, that's just the answer right now. It's just we just have to be patient. And, the draft and the offseason, just seeing how the guys respond to Kellen Moore and stuff like that, that'll be the first indicator towards the change that we're looking for.
Yeah, this is why I like having you around, because usually I have to be the it's not that bad guy. Like, let's relax.
Oh no, I'm so optimistic. I'm always optimistic. I have, you just have to be. You have to be.
See, I'm not that guy typically, but because people are always so negative all the time, I end up having to be, because otherwise I'll just be agreeing with people, and that's just not in my DNA. Like, I want to have a conversation, but to have a conversation, I always have to be like, guys, relax. Anyway, so I appreciate that. And no, like in the last episode we posted, like I spent about 10 minutes talking about, you want Derek Carr gone? Sure seems like he's taking care of that problem for you.
He's making it easy. He's making it easy. And that's why I kind of said it in a way that, like, Derek Carr is out right now. He's out mentally, he's out physically. And I guess in an organizational sense, he's out as far as a long-term outlook. So that means who's in? Spencer Rattler is in. That is an objective fact. Now, how long is he in? We don't know. But, that's why the patience, it has to take place, because if Spencer Rattler is in, I don't expect us to contend for a NFC South title. I don't. He's the worst quarterback in the division by far. That would put us in a position of having maybe the worst offense. We just have the least amount of cohesion in relative to the other teams. So maybe the Panthers, but
I was about to say, I don't know how far behind Bryce Young I'd put him. He's behind Bryce Young, just in the sense that Bryce Young's at least gone out and won a couple games. But
yeah. So, that's just something to think about. So, with the person that we have right now that we know that is healthy and that we're committed to, Spencer Rattler, that gives us maybe a chance at another quarterback. And I think next year's draft class at quarterback is far superior to this year's. So, there's some things to look forward to.
Sure looks that way. As people pointed out after the last episode, one of the questions is who comes out. Arch has kind of said, like, I want to come back 2 more years. My thinking is, when you're kind of, if he gets the end of the season and is like, I'm going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, you don't go back to college under those scenarios. But that's something to talk about down the line. I think we covered the Derek Carr of it all. What we want to talk about the rest of the episode is kind of related to that, but it's okay. What are the positions of need? I think it's a good time to talk about that, because the draft is around the corner. And I think deciding, hey, what are the biggest needs will help you decide if you're trying to pick between some equal prospects. So we're going to do that. Next segment, we're going to break down the bottom half of that list. Final segment, we're going to rank the top half of that list in terms of what are the biggest needs this Saints team has going into the draft. Position by position should be a good conversation. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Deven Johnson. We're going to get through a lot this episode. Appreciate everyone for hanging out and listening. Stick around. And we are back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Deven Johnson is back for another episode, and we're gonna try to keep this one a little more structured than we may have in the past. And as we mentioned, we're going to be talking about positions of need. Now, every team has positions of need. Some teams have a lot of positions of need. Some teams don't have a ton of positions of need. The Saints are in a position where basically every position is one that you could say, you could probably draft a guy there. So we're going to take this segment to go through what should be at the top of that list. And in order to do that, we're going to, so think of it this way. And this is kind of the hypothesis, if you will, if we're going with school terms. The theorem is, okay, teams will often have players with the same grade on their board. You don't want to draft for need. You want to often be going best player available. And I would argue the Saints should be going best player available here. Yeah. But where need comes in, where a position of need comes in, is if you have multiple players with basically identical grades, right? If I'm looking at an outside linebacker versus a defensive tackle, and I have basically identical grades on them, and I need an outside linebacker, I'm probably going to go for the outside linebacker. The theory here is you're going to look at all these positions, and we have 12 of them in terms of we're separating guard, center, and tackle. We're separating nickel corner versus outside corner. In the theory and the way we're looking at it, the Saints are staring at their draft board, and There are 12 players available. All of them have identical grades, and you have to make a pick. So who are you picking over somebody else is going to be based on, okay, what is your need at that position, right? That's how we're looking at it. And that's how we're going to kind of break this up in terms of, okay, what are the bottom 6 versus what are the top 6? I don't think we need to rank the ones at the bottom, but we are going to rank the ones at the top. Okay. So for this segment, we're going to just establish what the bottom half of that list is, meaning not that you don't want to draft a guy, but that if we're going based on need, these would be toward the bottom. And I'm going to let you kind of break your list down because this is your segment, and I'll kind of react to it more so than anything else. But let's start with what would you argue is the position of the least need on this Saints roster right now as we head into the draft?
Yeah, I would have to say at number 12, the absolute last position that we need, and this one might be a little controversial, is center. When I look at center, we have a rock steady Eric McCoy, who has been an anchor of our line since the Drew Brees era. He has played extremely well in both pass protection and as a run blocker. And honestly, I would say outside of last year, he's been relatively healthy. He's played 14 or more games in basically all of his career. And I actually remember when we drafted him, he missed basically no time at Mississippi State. So Eric McCoy, I would say, in terms of his youth, in terms of his production, his ability, and his versatility as a center, and also just the continuity that he has with the team, that would be the least position of need.
I do want to clean up Texas A&M. Eric, we get mad if
My bad.
I knew degrade him with the Mississippi State.
I'm sorry.
I will say, so that's a tough one for me because I kind of look at guard center as one thing. Mm-hmm. I agree in the sense that, and when you drafted Eric McCoy, you drafted him as a center. So that does happen. I think in most cases for the Saints, they're going to draft guard/center and go from there. But no, I agree with you. Like that 2019 draft, we kind of overlook it because it ended up being a solid draft. You ended up with Eric McCoy, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and Caden Ellis. And we don't think about they didn't have a first round pick that year, and Max Unger retired at the last second. You needed a center to go stand in front of Drew Brees and not be a problem. And they ended up with McCoy. I think it's one of the better draft picks of the last decade that we don't talk about that much. But I agree with you in terms of, are the Saints going out there saying, man, we better go find a center? No, they're absolutely not. Like, I think if you draft a guard, you would want them to be able to play center the same way you drafted Cesar Ruiz, who was a center, but you drafted him as a guard. But I don't disagree with you at all. So let's keep going.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say next to that, stand on the line is tackle. I truly do like what we have at tackle. In terms of the modern NFL, we have two tackles who are big, they're athletic, and they're scheme versatile. I love our tackles. I love Talise Fuaga. I feel like in the Cleveland Browns game, he showed himself to be highly effective against Myles Garrett, who is now the highest paid non-quarterback. Or no, maybe it's Jamar Chase. I'm sorry. These contracts, he's all world. And he was going against a rookie in Talise Fuaga. I think he played extremely well. He was available. He played out of position at left tackle. And I think, maybe he's found a home at that position. So I'm happy with him. Trevor Penning on the other side, I think he showed some improvements. I think, he still got a bulk of the hate on the offensive line because I think he was the most apparent weak link, if you want to say. But even then, Trevor Penning was great. As a run blocker, he's fantastic. He's extremely fast for his size. He gets out in space really well. So I like what we have at tackle. I think it allows us to do a lot of different things in terms of scheme, zone run. We used to like to use screens a lot, and those were two guys that were extremely efficient for doing that. So I like tackle. Third.
And I think it's worth mentioning, we're not saying the Saints shouldn't go out and draft these positions.
Right.
It's that if you were to go out and draft these positions, it would have to be because the guy you're drafting has a much higher grade. than someone at a position of need, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the conversation. I'd have tackle a little higher, but it is on the bottom half of my list because I agree with you. I think when you have starters that have played 17 games in a row at two positions and you're not like, well, we got to bench this guy, then the need does go down. So I think that's a good point. But again, if say someone who you love falls to you, even if you don't need them, you can still draft them. So that becomes a different conversation. But here, continue.
Yeah, and I would just say next up, kind of going upon that too, because this is one of those positions where if you just see a guy that you absolutely love, pull the trigger. But I would say it's tight end. The Saints have made some pretty big investments to tight end as far as Deven Johnson. We signed Foster Moreau. I mean, I feel as though we can upgrade, definitely, at tight end. I think Deven Johnson has a dynamic skill set. I don't know if the production necessarily matches that, but the Saints seem pretty content with what they have. And for the time being, I will too. I think that Deven Johnson may be utilized differently with a new offensive leadership. So, that can definitely field some new results. So I would say tight end. And right after tight end, I would have to say maybe slot corner. I think that we have guys who can play slot corner. We just have to figure out outside, which we're going to get to. But when you have a guy like Alontae Taylor, you have guys like Kool-Aid McKinstry who have played slot corner out of necessity, then you get, I think there's added comfort in the slot corners that you have. And I also want to note, like, slot corner, while it is a position that I have as a low need for us, it's extremely important in football. You need those guys to, nowadays, slot corners are essentially third linebackers. So you need them to cover tight ends. You need them to cover slot wide receivers, obviously, but they also have to come up and run support and sometimes blitz. So I think, the Saints have pretty good options at slot corner.
Yeah. So to me, the level of need at slot corner depends on, are you going to play Alontae there? Are you going to play Kool-Aid there? Or are you going to play those two guys outside? In which case you do have to go find a slot corner. Now, there's a lot of ways to go find a slot corner. Like CJ Gardner-Johnson, you could argue, was one of the top slot corners in the NFL when the Saints had him. He was a 4th-round pick. So, you can find the slot corner that is a safety and is going to kind of convert. You can find a slot corner who's a outside corner who you can shift inside. So, it's also not a premium position. You could probably get the top slot corner in the draft in the 2nd round, whereas the top corner in the draft that's going to play outside is going to go in the top 10. So I agree with you. I have all of those. We're on the same page in terms of the positions you've named so far are all on the bottom half of my list. I have them in a slightly different order, but that's neither here nor there. So I think that's 4 or 5.
That is 4 so far. So
2 or 3 more on the bottom half.
Yeah. So my next one would have to be linebacker, inside linebacker.
Inside linebacker.
Yeah, inside linebacker. I would say right now we have a pretty good duo at linebacker. I feel like in maybe the last 2 years, I feel like their play has been impacted a little bit by a regression in our defensive line. But Pete Werner and Demario Davis, are really good. I think that they work well versatility-wise. They're both fast. Demario Davis is a great tackler. Yes, he did miss some tackles last year. He finally started to show his age. But overall, I feel like I'm confident with that nucleus of guys. And right after that, I would have to say, staying on the defensive side of the ball, and this is starting to get closer to the needs. So we have strong safety.
So you broke them up with strong and free?
Yeah, definitely. Because I for safety, they're strong safety and free safety, they are becoming interchangeable in terms of the actual terminology. But safety in general definitely still has that delineation between your in the box guys and the guys that kind of roam and cover the field. You have Ed Reeds, you have Cam Chancellors. That's kind of how I see it. And could Ed Reed play strong safety? Sure. But, he definitely was more of a free safety in terms of his ball hawking ability, ball production, and things of that nature. The Saints need a strong safety. Why do we need a strong safety? Because we need an enforcer. We have no one over the middle, who can lay a boom. Honey Badger is missing tackles now. Honey Badger is taking bad angles. That's a big part of a strong safety. We need someone to come downhill and clean up tackles, and we don't really have that. And while, again, it's not the biggest position of need, it is something I think could help us. So I
think Justin Reed could be that guy.
No, I like Justin Reed more as a coverage guy. I think, he's shown the ability in like a Steve Spagnuolo defense to like tackle and fly around the field. But I like his ability more so playing like a single high or showing off his athleticism in like a deep half kind of coverage responsibility. So I really do think, we need more of a downhill guy, someone that could come up in the box, someone that could check tight ends and make some tackles. Kind of like when we had Kenny Vaccaro back in the day. I was a big Kenny Vaccaro fan. I liked how we utilized him.
Gotcha. So is that, are you saying free safety is next on the list, or is
that is free safety next? No, I don't think free safety. Free safety would go below strong safety. My bad. Okay. You're right. I see what you're saying. Free safety would go below strong safety, and then strong safety would be next.
Do you have them? You have them next to each other, though.
Right. They're next to each other. Yeah.
I agree. I agree in that sense of like when I'm talking about needs. If you have two starters that you feel good about, then the need is less, right?
Okay.
Like need a lot of time. Like last year, left tackle was a massive, or tackle in general was a massive need. You didn't have a starter. Like you needed to get a starter out of the draft. In this case, I think for both inside linebacker and safety, you'd probably like to add talent to that room, but you shouldn't feel like there's added pressure to go find a guy who could start right away, right? Yeah. So that takes a little of the pressure off. Now, I like Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu are both old guys. So how the longer you spend depending on them being those, kind of, okay, they're there always kind of guys is more and more dangerous as you go further on. That said, just to get back to linebacker, I think the change from Dennis Allen's defense actually makes the need at inside linebacker a little less, because you really only need two now.
Yeah.
Last year, you kind of needed a third to be that Sam linebacker, especially, more teams are trying to bring back the power run game, right? So your Sam linebacker might be on the field a little bit more. Like if you're facing the Eagles, for example, who live out of 12 personnel, but in this format, you don't really need that as much. In the 3-4 in the Brandon Staley scheme, your Sam linebacker is really an outside linebacker. So that's going to be the list for this segment. Again, we're going through the positions of need from the least need to the most need. So 14 will be the position we feel like has the least amount of need. This is your list, but I'm going to read it off. So at 14, you're going to have center. At 13, tackle. So we're breaking up all the offensive line spots in that way.
Yeah.
Tight end at number 12. Slot corner at number 11. So again, we're breaking up that position, slot and outside. Inside linebacker at number 10, which the Saints now have a separated inside linebacker, outside linebacker in Brandon Staley's scheme.
Yeah.
And then the two safety positions slot in at number 9 and number 8.
Yeah.
All that is to say, the next segment is going to have the top 7, and we're going to rank them in that way. And it's going to go from 7 to 1 in terms of 7 of that group is the position with the least amount of need, and 1 is the position that you got to get a player at this position.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't, that's a problem. So let's end this segment. I think it was a good breakdown. We'll come back and we'll go through the top half of that list. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Deven Johnson. This is Inside Black and Gold. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Deven Johnson. We are continuing on the track that we set in the last segment. We are ranking the Saints by positions of need, by position heading into the draft. So again, basically think of it this way. If the Saints had perfectly even grades on 14 different players, one at each position that we are looking at, which player would they pick in terms of which do they need the most? Now, this is a completely theoretical exercise. It would literally never happen. It's virtually impossible. Honestly, it is impossible. But the point is to come up with a list from 14 to 1 of which positions they need the most. So let's recap the bottom half of your list before we get into the top half. That's 14 center. You're good with Eric McCoy. You don't need that. 13 tackle. Some people probably will disagree on this to some extent, but you do have 2 starters there, and like you said, you feel good about them. They're both young. We'll see how that goes. 12, tight end. You brought back Deven Johnson. Definitely a player you feel good about if you're the Saints. Maybe you could add more, but definitely not a massive need. 11, slot corner. We'll see what they decide to do there in terms of Alante has been good at slot corner, but do they want to play him there? 10, inside linebacker. You have Pete Werner, Demario Davis. You're going to feel decent about that position. And then 9 and 8, free safety, strong safety, not unlike inside linebacker where you have 2 starters. So how much of a need is it really? You could still bring in guys at any of those spots, but it's not going to be, we need that guy, right? Like, for example, last year, the Saints were drafting a tackle. It was just a matter of which one was there when they picked. So with all that said, how you feel? You feeling good about this list?
I feel great about it. And it kind of does give me perspective on what they might target, because I think the holes are more glaring. And that's the thing, in terms of deciding or designating what a position of need is. For me, it boils down to, okay, how did this position group perform? And then how did their lack of production impact the team? So, I think going into this next list, we'll be able to kind of see how, the need is determined.
Okay, so let's start by going through 7 through 4.
Yeah.
And we can stop and talk about them, but in general, let's just get through the 7 through 4, so then we can spend more time on the top 3, which once you identify your top 3 positions of need, I think that's important to your offseason. So let's start 7 through 4. Where do you have them?
So at number 7, I'm starting with the backfield. I have running back. I like Alvin Kamara. I hate that I have to scroll through Instagram and people say he's never been 1,000-yard rusher. That's absurd. He was 50 yards shy of 1,000 yards last year, and he missed the last 3 games. It's pretty implied that he probably would have gotten it. Alvin Kamara is also the league leader in scrimmage yards since he's been drafted. So he's still doing really, really good. We just don't have the success to actually show for what he's been doing, but I like him. Now
I do have to throw Cat Terrell under the bus here, because I don't care. I'm gonna share this conversation that we had, because I think she is personally responsible for him not getting to 1,000 yards. Because I remember last year we were at the Saints facility, we were walking back, and she was talking about how she was, putting together a story about, okay, it's the first time he's had 1,000 yards in his career, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know, man, you better be careful, because he's not there yet. And she's like, what does he need? Like 50 yards? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. I'm not saying. Yeah. And wouldn't you know it, he ended up missing the final 3 games, didn't get his yards. So it is Cat Terrell's fault. Let her know that he is the reason that Alvin has never had 1,000 rushing yards. But I agree. Like, that's a stupid, it's like, oh, if he had 50 more rushing yards and got to 1,000 yards, suddenly you'd respect his career more. It's like he had a career high in rushing yards last year. He should have gotten there, but either way, I'd have running back a little higher, just because running back is a position that people get hurt constantly. And what happens when Alvin goes out? Who's taken over? And right now, I don't see that guy. And I think more so than any other position, I need a ladder of guys that I have confidence in. And I don't see that at running back. So I still wouldn't put it in my top 3. I'd put it at 4 personally.
Okay.
But
no, I agree.
I think you're on the right track of, like, it's not at the top of my list, but there is a need level there. And any of the positions we mention here, even if they're not at the top, are still positions of need. Like the Saints need a running back. They just don't need running back more than they need some of these other spots. So continue.
Right. And I was just going to say to that point too, I think there's also, that's kind of another perspective of looking at it in terms of a need, standpoint, is depth. That is important. Again, that was a great perspective. You looked at running back being a little bit higher from maybe a depth standpoint. But for me, I looked at it from more of just a star perspective. We have a star running back, so I feel as though, that's lower. But no, that is, that's a great point to look at it from, because Alvin Kamara is getting older. Running back is a pretty gruesome position by nature. You're taking hits every single play. It only gets worse with age. So it is something that we could look at. But I would say next at number 6, I have outside receiver. The Saints currently, we have some interesting guys at wide receiver, to say the least. We have Chris Olave, who we took 3 years ago now. I would say his first 2 seasons were pretty good. Last season was a season in which we kind of started to see some of the things that we saw the first 2 seasons, and it all came into fruition. He took a lot of hits. He struggled with concussions, with injuries. Chris Olave, I think talent-wise, is a great player. I don't know if he's completely a number 1. And when we think of outside receiver, you kind of think of that. Those 2 terms are synonymous, number 1 and outside. So I think we need an outside guy who can give us a chance in one-on-ones. We need a guy that we can throw fades to in the red zone. A Michael Thomas. There's no other way to say it. We just had this kind of guy 4 years ago, and that's what I would say we need. We need another Michael Thomas.
Well, whether you call it an X, whether you call it outside, big-bodied wide receiver, yeah, I think that's kind of what you're looking at. It's like, the Saints have some really intriguing pieces at receiver. They don't have a varied room of guys who can do a lot of different things. So I agree with you there. Go ahead.
Yeah, and next to that, staying on the offensive side of the ball, I have to go guard, and very specifically left guard. One thing about your offensive line is if you have one position on the offensive line that is weaker in comparison to the others, it could get exploited. I feel like our left guard position has some pretty big questions. We had Lucas Patrick start last season. We signed him. He got hurt. We had Nick Saldiveri. He struggled with injuries. So we need a long-term answer at that left guard position in order to really establish that continuity. We don't have, continuity on the inside. So I would like to see us target that position in some way, shape, or form. And then next, at number 4, we have cornerback. The Saints last year, we struggled in coverage, and it was hard to see, especially after having maybe a 5-year stretch or so of actually having a really good secondary. A lot of that did start with Aaron Glenn, but we need help at corner. We have Kool-Aid, we have Alante. Alante is interesting. I mean, on the inside, he plays a lot better. He's able to show his versatility and his athleticism. On the outside, you don't know what you're going to get from him. I think the game against the Browns was really bad. And, it really exacerbated our need for corner. And as far as Kool-Aid, he just needs some experience. But we need another guy. I think in the current NFL, you need to have at least about 3 to 4 corners kind of on deck. And we don't have that. We don't have the depth. And we still don't necessarily have we don't have a definitive idea of, okay, this guy's our outside, this guy's our slot. So we need an outside. That's number 1. We need a true outside in order to make that decision a little bit easier.
All you have to do is look at last year and say, like, okay, how quickly can things change when you have one cornerback injury? And then, you have another one. Oh, geez. Okay, we're starting a rookie. We're starting the guy we came into the season with as our slot corner outside across from a rookie who probably isn't ready to play yet, but we're throwing him in there because we have to. And those were second round picks that people would have said at the time are luxury. Like, you don't need that guy, but you do need that guy. So no, I mean, you got to build up that stable. I don't know how things are going to change from where you were with Dennis Allen to where you are now from a draft perspective. Was he a little louder in that room in terms of, guys, we need an extra corner. If we don't get a corner in this draft, we could be in trouble, versus now where it's an offensive guy leading the team. And, maybe he doesn't feel that way. It's like, we need an extra wide receiver. We need an extra running back. I don't know. We need an extra tight end, so we'll see how that changes. But if the Saints' philosophy stays the same, then they're still going to believe we may, like we talked about, okay, we have 2 starting linebackers. We feel good about that. You have 2 starting corners and no one behind them. You don't feel good about that.
Don't feel good about that.
And corners are tough. It's a tough position to draft late and develop. You don't see that a lot. You see a lot of highly drafted players, and guys do develop, but it's a position that most teams believe they should invest at. So I agree with you. I have, if I had my order, I had wide receiver at 6, outside corner at 5, running back at 4. One of your positions in the top 3, I also had a little lower. We'll get to that in when we get there. But no, I mean, rank it however you want. Those positions are in the top half of this list, which means that they're positions of need. There are positions of greater need. And if you're doing the math at home, you can guess which positions are in the top 3, because there's only so many positions on a football field. But let's start out with number 3. What is it for you?
In terms of an immediate need, I'm going to have to go with quarterback. We just talked about all of the drama with Derek Carr, the uncertainty with Spencer Rattler. I'm going to be honest, we have a roster to where if we kind of fill out some of these supporting positions better, I would say we could do okay with a decent quarterback. Quarterback is also a kind of an interesting position too, because as we see with good schematics and good personnel, you actually could do good with a game manager. The Brock Purdy is an excellent example of that. I'm not saying Spencer Rattler is a Brock Purdy. Not even saying that you should aim for a Brock Purdy. At the end of the day, this dude's nickname is Mr. Irrelevant. He was the last pick taken in the draft. But again, that just goes to show that, there's 2 ways to kind of go about this. You could look at it from a team building perspective, or you could start from the head of the snake and just get you a signal caller. So I think that quarterback is up there, and it's number 3 because we don't have a franchise guy. We don't have a guy that we can just dedicate the next 10 years to. Spencer Rattler has not proven himself to be that guy. I don't know if Derek Carr is going to have a shoulder in 5 years to be that guy. And it's just plain as that. We need a franchise guy. We need someone that we can count on, season in and season out. So I have quarterback at number 3.
I'm just going to be honest. If you want fans of your podcast, don't use the word Derek Carr in 5 years down the road in the same sentence. I don't think anyone's thinking 5 weeks down the road at this point for Derek. Right. And that's why, I would have put quarterback lower on this list. It's still high on this list. I would have put it lower a month ago when I felt like, okay, this is at least going to be one more season. So you can say if the guy's there that we like, we're going to get him. Otherwise, we're not going to force anything.
Yeah.
I think with the situation that we know now, I do think that moves up at least one spot for me in terms of I have quarterback at number 2.
Okay. I respect
that. We're splitting hairs here in the sense of it's toward the top. And when quarterback is toward the top of your positions of need list, then you are in the quarterback business. And if you're in the quarterback business, then you're in a position where you might force something. So we're, again, it's up there a little higher now than it might have been if things had broken a different way. But yeah, so I agree with you. What do you have at number 2?
So at number 2, I have pass rusher. I have edge pass rusher. The Saints struggled last year to generate a pass rush. Let's just be honest. Cam Jordan, love him. Great human, great personality, great leader, locker room guy. But in terms of his on the field production, Cam Jordan is not the Cam Jordan that we have become accustomed to. Carl Granderson, we signed him to an extension. We didn't see the results that we were expecting out of Carl Granderson, granted the extension that was given to him. Chase Young was a welcome addition last year. He definitely had a give me, try out kind of year. I would say he played pretty decent. I'm excited, to see what he does in his second season, but he wasn't dominant or great by any stretch of the term. So we need a pass rush. And I feel like it starts for me with the edge. We need to be able to generate some kind of edge pass rush, but also we need speed in our pass rush. I've said this, before, but it is incredibly hard to get to the quarterback if you're slow. That's kind of a given. It's even harder to get to a quarterback if you're slow and the quarterback could just evade around you and escape. We don't have guys that can chase down mobile quarterbacks, so we need that. That's what I would say for number 2 is that we need outside pass rush. If I have to be specific, D-end outside linebacker. We need one of those guys. Think of like a James Pierce or another Chase Young. We need that kind of archetype.
Yeah, see, I look at it a little differently, right? I think it's a bigger need than number 2. I think it's number 1 personally, but it's a specific type of outside linebacker that I need, and it is an actual outside linebacker. Yeah. Right? Like I think the Saints have pass rushers. Yeah. I think you make a good point in that for whatever reason, people didn't talk about Carl Granderson that last year as much as they probably should have in that. What did he do? Like he got paid in 2023. He had a great start to the year. They paid him. Did we spend much time saying Carl Granderson's name last year? No. Like, I don't feel like he delivered on that contract at all. No. And so like, I kind of feel like he's a guy that kind of flew under the radar because everyone is going to talk about Chase Young, Cam Jordan's there. Carl really had a disappointing season for me. All that said, I don't think he's an outside linebacker type. I think the Saints have a lot of strong side defensive end players for this season. I don't think they have necessarily a single outside linebacker to play on the weak side, get into coverage a little bit more, chase down kind of reverse plays, that sort of thing. I do think Isaiah Foskey is probably going to find a home, or at least more of a home, in that role than he was ever going to in the 4-3 defensive end role. But like whether it's Abdul Carter, which probably not going to be on the board, but the point is like Abdul Carter, Donovan Ezeraku, Jalen Walker, guys that would probably have been scratched off the Saints list in previous seasons, I think now become a major need because in this scheme, you don't just need edge rushers, you need edge rushers who can do multiple things. You need an edge rusher who can get outside, who can be a little bit more athletic, right? And so that's, to me, the number 1 need because you just don't have it, right? Yeah. And like, I think it opens up the board in a way that it hasn't been before. Like last year, if you showed me an edge rusher who was 6'1", 235, I'd have been like, yeah, he might be good. Nolan Smith might be great. But the Saints aren't drafting Nolan Smith. Yeah. If Brandon Staley was the Saints defensive coordinator a few years back, Nolan Smith might be on the Saints. He wasn't then because of the scheme. He could be now. So I think whenever you change a scheme, whether it's offense or defense, whatever you don't have that you need to fit that scheme skyrockets to the top of your list. So that's why I have it on top of my list. What is your number 1 position?
My number 1 position, if anyone hasn't guessed, it is interior D-line. That's the only thing that's left. I feel like you gave a good reason as to why we needed a specific type of outside linebacker. One thing that I guess my reasoning for why, because it is hard. I think they're like what and what, in terms of DN or D tackle. The reason why I have D tackle over defensive end is because of the positional versatility that defensive tackles presents. The Saints first of all, could not stop the run last year. We struggled mightily within the trenches. We talked about, Demario Davis missing some tackles, Tyrann Mathieu missing some tackles. Some of those came as a byproduct of dudes literally just running through the middle, just gashing us, going, 3-4 yards untouched. We weren't able to consistently generate penetration. That's number one. I feel like if we could get a defensive tackle that can do that, that would be tremendous. But in addition to that, defensive tackles who can pass rush, those guys that is a top 3 position in the league to me in general. I don't know if we can get that. I think Mason Graham is that kind of player potentially. But like even thinking about a Brandon Staley defense, one of the biggest beneficiaries that Brandon Staley had was Aaron Donald. When you have a guy like Aaron Donald he is both the pass rush and the run game. You can't run up the middle on him, but you also can't even double team him because he's beating double teams. I just think that is so valuable for a defense. And I think the Saints have one building block on with that in Brian Bresee. I think that, he has pretty decent versatility. He can improve as a run defender, but as a pass rusher, he showed, I would say, some pretty big strides. He almost had 10 sacks last year. He had about 7.5, I think. But if we could get another guy and really have a good duo inside, is both a run stopping tandem and a pass rushing duo, I think that would just pay so much dividends. I think about the Eagles with Jalen Carter and Milton Williams and Jordan Davis. It's just having a dominant interior it truly is twofold in what it does for your team. So I think we need that, and it showed. We got no push up the middle again in both the run game and no push, in the pocket, and it showed. So
you've sold me. Give me. Can we go draft Aaron Donald? That's easy, right? We could. There's like dozens of those guys, right? Like
no, he doesn't fall off trees. A 6'1".
No, I'm joking, but at the same time, like no, when you. Like, I think that's the point you're making is like when you have a field tilting guy like that, whether it's, there's only one Aaron Donald, but, when you're talking about elite defensive tackles, Chris Jones change games, right?
Yeah.
I have defensive tackle a little lower, and it's not that I don't think they need a defensive tackle. It's that I don't know exactly what they need right now. I'm a little kind of, and that's not really a good reason, but like I think Brian Bresee is actually a lot better suited for this scheme than he was for Dennis Allen's scheme.
Yes.
Because, as a 3-4 defensive end, you're a little more free to get upfield, and your run responsibilities are not as significant as they are as that 3 technique defensive tackle. And exactly. I think he could thrive in that role. And we've already seen him thrive as a pass rushing defensive tackle, and so this should give him theoretically even more opportunity to do that. Devon Godchaux you have as your starter. We'll see how that looks as a nose tackle. I do think they need to bring in a nose tackle, but I don't think you're desperate to bring in a nose tackle. I think you can find somebody, and then on the other side, we'll see. It's tough, but I still have that a little lower, just because I'm short-sighted. And the more we talk about it, the more I probably need to have it a little higher. I put it at 7. I probably need to have it closer to 5 or 4. But no, I think you make good points there. I think one of the frustrating things of last year was you can't have an elite defense if you can't stop the run. There has not been an elite defense in NFL history that gets gashed on the ground all the time.
Yeah.
It's got to start there. So
it has to.
I might not move it up to number 1, but you've convinced me. I think I should be moving that up 2 or 3 spots. So
it's just extremely well, and I can see your point too, but it's just extremely valuable. Like when you have a front that's capable of stopping the run, you're mitigating second and shorts or third and shorts. Things of that nature. It gets harder to play defense when you're guessing, when you don't know what a team is going to do. And I feel like as a byproduct of our run defense being so porous, that's the kind of situations that the Saints were in. Like, we're constantly, in these 2nd and 6 situations, or we weren't able to. It just was. It was too problematic. We couldn't stop the run, and we couldn't pass rush. It's no other way to put it. That's a compounding problem, and I think too the change in scheme does maybe mitigate, because to your point, it kind of mitigates the need for a pure D tackle. You're right. Brian Bresee now is moving more to a 3-tech role primarily. So he'll always essentially have a one-on-one. And Devon Godchild, whoever plays nose tackle, will take on that nose Vince Wilfork kind of role. But in some way, shape, or form, I just want to say overall, the Saints have to address the D tackle. If we are able to get a player that can generate like a Myles Garrett or TJ Watt, great. If we could get an Aaron Donald, great. In that sense, it does get harder to say, oh, is D tackle better than DN? But yeah, we struggle with the foundational things defensively. So the line would definitely help with that. And when you have a great D line, it also makes your necessity for having a elite secondary less. If you have guys that could generate pressure in 2-3 seconds, then, having Alontae Taylor or Kool-Aid McKinstry playing in your back end, it isn't as pronounced. So.
No, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. My top 3, just for clarity, I didn't separate guard center. So, because I think if you draft a guard and he can't play center, what are you doing? Like, you should have a guard who can play center. Either way, okay. My top 3 is guard, quarterback, outside linebacker, edge rusher. So that's where we differ a little bit. But our top 6 is pretty, whether they are in the exact order, our top 6 is pretty similar. So just to recap your list. Now, we went through the first 7 in the last segment. The top 7 going from least need to most need for you. 7 was running back. 6 was wide receiver, specifically outside wide receiver and X wide receiver, a bigger guy who can beat one-on-ones. 5 is guard. 4 outside corner. 3 quarterback. People might disagree on this, but you have quarterback up there. Again, if quarterback is in your top 3 ever, you need a quarterback. Right? Yeah. You're definitely not putting quarterback in the top 3 of your needs. Like, it might not be at the top of your list, but if quarterback is in one of your top 3 needs, then you don't have
need it
because you don't have a quarterback.
Right.
2, edge, outside linebacker, that type of player.
Yeah.
1 for you, defensive tackle. How are you feeling about your list? Do you want to make any last second edits, or are you feeling good?
I do not. For the simple fact, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but
I know this is objectively the right list. Everyone, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's etched in stone. Everyone knows this.
I just want to stand on, again, the number 1 being D tackle because I spoke on it. I said, I based our needs based off of how the position group performed and the impacts that it had. So with the D line that we had last year, we were horrible against the run, and we were pretty bad as a pass rushing unit. So with that being said, and also translating that to the success that we see with teams with good D lines, specifically interior D lines, specifically with the 2 teams who were just in the Super Bowl having 2 of the best defensive tackles in the league. I just think defensive tackle is one of those positions that is not well represented in terms of what it does for the game. You really do have a dominant, and it doesn't just have to be one player. It could be a unit. So if you have a dominant interior unit, it makes it extremely hard for opposing teams to run up the middle, but also to pass. When you're able to generate that pass rush through the middle, it is extremely hard. There's nothing you can do about a guy who's coming at you from a straight line. From the outside, sure, you could dodge him, might have a little bit of time, but we all saw what Aaron Donald and Chris Jones have done in their absolute primes. It's a terror. So that's just that. And then as far as the pass rusher, we need a pass rusher. We need speed. We need a quarterback. If you are a Saints fan and you think we don't need a quarterback, what have you been watching? We need a quarterback. It's undeniable. We had Drew Brees. We were spoiled, and now we are reaping the the downsides of that. We've been in QB purgatory for about 4 to 5 years now. It's time for us to get out.
I don't, I need to do a welfare check on the agenda people, because like I swear last year all I heard was about Spencer Rattler being like the best thing ever, and now everyone's like, we need to draft a guy. What happened to those people?
Well, no, that's one thing it almost
seems like, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but it almost seems like a lot of the Spencer Rattler people were actually just anti-Derek Carr people.
That's all it is. That's all it is. Yeah, they didn't have true allegiance. Again, they hated Derek Carr that much. That's all it is. Saints fans are bipolar. We know this. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, like the team we ranked, or the position we ranked 14th on this list, doesn't mean you won't draft a player at that position. It just means you're not reaching for a guy because of the need. Anyway, that's where we're at. That list is official. Send it to the printer, and if you have any issues with it, go take it up with Deven. Let him know at Dev John Sports, and
at me. Go ahead.
At me.
At me.
Get in my mentions. All right. That was I think we got through a lot here. Ranked them all, and I'm ready for the draft. How about you?
Yeah, man. I wish it was today. Why can't it be this Thursday?
Yeah, got a week. It's like, it's crazy that it's a week away. I still haven't this time next week, I will already be at the Saints facility, like being like, I'm going to live here for the next 72 hours. And, we'll go from there.
How excited are you to see Roger Goodell get booed with the first selection?
I'm over it. It's performative now. He likes it. He waits for it. Once he started embracing it, it started being like, now we're doing it for him. And I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. He was so confident that he brought his own like lazy boy recliner out there as if like, that's what we're after. I don't know. I'm done with it. I'm done.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, that's I'm not, what that I don't want a lazy boy recliner on this. Anyway, stop giving people weird hugs. Okay, moving on. This is Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Deven Johnson, great stuff. Thanks for being here, man. Appreciate you spending the time. Again, you can follow him at Dev John Sports. You can hit me up at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. If you're listening to this on your podcast player and you'd like to watch our faces as we talk, you can check that out at WWL Sports and the latest content over at WWL.com and on WWL Radio. Oh, yeah, and we have an app, the Audacy app. That's up too. Who dat?
Who dat?
It's busy, y'all.
Go Saints.